Thanks very much, and welcome all to this brief session for 30 minutes. My name is Will Scott. We've not got many people here, so I'm quite happy for you guys to come off mute. If you want to ask a question live with voice, that's also fine with me as well. A brief introduction to myself. I'm from the UK originally, but I'm now based here up in Austin, up in Georgetown actually. And currently I'm a fractional CMO, marketing consultant, and also I run my own WinLoss interview business as well. That's the end of the plug. I'm just here to share with you what I've learned over the last few years of doing this, so some best practice for WinLoss. And I think for product managers, it's a really important and yet massively underutilized intelligence resource is formal WinLoss interviews. And more often than not, we leave this up to the sales guys to do, and I think that actually generates some very suspect answers. So let me go to my deck here. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully we can all see that. Yep. Quick thanks to all the sponsors for ProductCamp. I think this has been going on, I don't know how many years. I remember years ago when Paul Young did the very first one of these. So it's long in the tooth, but thanks to all our sponsors. So here today, I'm going to talk about insights for win-loss discovery, and perhaps a good place to start is to talk about what we mean by win-loss. So the regular structured opening question of won or lost customers to gain their subjective assessment into your whole offer. Now, there's a lot of stuff in that. I'm just going to double click on some of these words here that have occurred to me as being important. Regular, this is not something you do once and never do again. In fact, it's something you should do on an ongoing basis. We want to have structure because ultimately what we're looking for is not anecdotal evidence from one win-loss interview. Rather, we want to look for patterns and the emergence of patterns and the elimination of patterns as well. So using the same structure, the same template over and over again helps us do that, as just opposed to ad hoc questioning. With ad hoc questioning, it's very difficult to draw patterns and draw dots between data points. Open questioning. So this is not closed questioning. This is not asking a question, for example, did you like our API? That's a very close-ended question. And the answer to that question, if you asked a one customer, let's say, is yes, I did like your API, you may well then conclude the reason you won is because of your API or whatever the feature might be. A better way of putting that question is, what did you think of our API? Not did you like it? So we want open-ended question, not close-ended question. With close-ended questioning, we're typically revealing our biases, and we're also leading customers down there. Won or lost? So often we spend time thinking about just talking to lost customers. And there's a lot to be learned for sure for lost customers. But talking to won customers, I found, can be very revealing as well. So understanding your strengths and how to emphasize those, because keep in mind, your win is your competitor's loss. So understanding from customers, not that just you've lost, but also customers that you've won, can reveal an awful lot as well. And then finally, subjective assessment, or penultimately, the subjective assessment. Put this very carefully. It really doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what the CEO thinks. The only thing that really matters is what the customer, won or lost, thinks. So we're looking for their subjective assessment, even though you may disagree with it, even though you think they might have got things wrong. The only thing that matters in the case of win-loss interviews is the subjective assessment of the end customer. And then finally, I use the word whole offer, and I'm going to double click on that a little bit. It's not just asking for a feature assessment of your product, if that's what you're doing. It's a lot more. It's not just asking for the reaction to the price point you offered. I'll talk about whole offer in a little bit, but really what we want is have a 360-degree review of the whole offer. So what's the problem with the typical approaches? Well, I'm talking specifically in the B2B context here. Here's a nice chart from Gartner. You know, a B2B sales cycle, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, that can reveal itself over 1, 2, 3 quarters, maybe longer. On your side, you've got account executives, sales engineers, consultants, finance, legal, interacting with a whole bunch of people on the customer side, decision makers, detractors, influencers, again, procurement. And all of these interactions today, we typically expect them to be summarized with a single win-loss reason code in the Salesforce or whatever your CRM system is. And I'm sure we've seen these before. And my view is certainly this does not do justice to a B2B sales cycle. I think we can collapse everything down to a multi-quarter engagement to one word. We won because of price, we lost because of feature, is doing a disservice to the B2B sales cycle. And so really what we're looking for is a much more assessment one. And even if we do get that one word, notwithstanding the problems with who's collecting that information, what do we do with it? So let's say the loss reason is price. You know, as a wise man once said, there's a big difference between it's too expensive and I can't afford it. It's too expensive says I don't see the value in what it is that you're providing. I can't afford it can actually mean something quite different, which is I see the value, I just simply don't have the budget to buy it. Yet both of those quite different loss reasons may well conclude in the loss code price. So when we get these single words and these unidimensional, single dimensional reasons, usually they're not particularly useful to us. So this is what I mean by whole offer. Really, we want that one customer, that lost customer, to assess our whole offer across these key factors. The first is engagement. What's that sales engagement like? What was good about it? What was bad about it? The offer, and this doesn't just mean the price point, it also means the whole construct of the offer, minimum commits, term of the offer, ability to pull down additional products, the overall legal and financial structure of the offer. The next, of course, is product. We want to get an assessment of what they thought of our product. And I'll use this in its broadest term. This doesn't have to apply to software. Equally apply. I've done win-loss interviews for services, a whole range of different offers, but I use product in its broadest term here. And then brand. What did they think of you as a company? What's your reputation in the marketplace? What did the analysts say of you? How did you present yourself? Did you come across as authoritative? What was that overall brand experience? And then finally, and this typically only applies in the case of a loss, is what we call the demand side. It's where we ask the question, in the case of a loss, was there anything going on your side, Mr. Loss customer, that led to the loss? Maybe there was a change in priorities or a change in leadership or a change in budget. So really what we're trying to do is go well beyond those single word win-loss codes that often don't serve us well into this multidimensional approach. I actually just realized I'm going full screen here. Okay, I'm just making sure I can see any questions that come in. So let's talk about making the case. And this is perhaps one of the hardest things to do. Making the case for a win-loss program. Well, really it breaks down into two areas, a qualitative case and a quantitative case. The qualitative case, I've typically used this structure from Mandel Communications, which is a nice way to position anything really, where we're trying to explain why we'd want to do a formal win-loss program, and more importantly, why we would not want that typically to be with the sales organization. So the structure is, what is the situation? What's the current state of affairs? What don't we like about that state of affairs? What happens if that state of affairs continues? What's our position? Why do we think we should change? And to change, what do we need to do about it? And finally, what will be the outcome if we do that? So this is a really powerful tool for lots of things when you're positioning new initiatives, but I've used this before when positioning, making a win-loss case. And here's one completed for making the case for a win-loss program. This is actually available on the SteelPoint Research website if you want to download this template. But basically the idea is it fits on one page and it explains in straightforward language why you should have a win-loss program. And the second element of making the case is a quantitative one. It's quite difficult to make a bulletproof quantitative one because you're asserting that there's going to be a decrease in loss rates or an increase in sales velocity or what have you. But it's certainly intuitive to make these sort of claims that if we understood why we won better and if we understood why we lost better, then that would have a favorable effect on some of these items here, whether that's a reduction in loss rate or reduction in sales velocity, or increase in the speed of the sale, for example, and so on and so forth. And I think at this point here, it's important to understand some of the objections you might come across. And typically I found most companies believe they're doing some kind of win-loss program. And I would say more often than not, that is anecdotal evidence captured by the salesperson and then dropped into that CRM system. And that's really what most companies claim is their win-loss program. And there's many problems with that. We've already talked about how limiting those single dimensional words is you might see in a CRM system. But a bigger problem, frankly, is sales doing it. And let's talk about that. And I'm not having to go at sales here at all, but I'm just going to talk about some of the issues with it. The first is the salesperson has the word sales in their title. And so when they go to interview that one customer or that lost customer, they're going to come with baggage. They're going to come with context. They're going to come with some kind of perception the customer has for them. Maybe they're trying to salvage the deal. Maybe they're trying to upsell me, cross-sell me, whatever it might be. Unfortunately, salespeople come with a stigma by the very nature of the fact that they have the word sales in their title. And that's just a reality. And so as a result, whatever data you do get from a win-loss interview is suspect because it goes through that filter. The second issue with sales guys doing this is typically they're not trained in doing this. Typically sales guys have got a certain characteristic about them and they're looking to close deals and what have you. So they're not necessarily trained in the techniques of listening for, listening for pauses, listening for hesitation, asking those open-end questions. In fact, many times the salesperson's goal is just to get a plausible win-loss code into the CRM system so they can move on to the next deal, which is precisely what we want sales to do. So the third reason and pushback you often get when you propose doing a product management-led win-loss program, whether you do that internally or you outsource it, is typically the sales team will say, well, we're already doing that, so you don't need to do it. Secondly is the customers won't want to speak to you because they lost and they're done with us. So that's another, common reason that they have put in there as well. And frankly, for many sales guys, it's in their interest to be in control of the win-loss narrative. But the final question, the final objection you typically get is, I can't possibly have you speak to that customer, won or lost, because there's some super sensitive sales motion in process right now. And if you come in and talk to them about why we won or why we lost, then that's going to mess up my sales motion. I hope some of you find that familiar. That's very common for that. And so you have to counter that. You have to say, listen, we've got to go in with an unbiased, open mind with people who are trained to do that, to ask in a serious and structured way why we won or why we lost. And frankly, that's not necessarily happening with sales guys leading that right now. That's typically where you're going to get the biggest pushback in my experience. Let me just check here and see if any questions have come in. Not yet, no. So the process is pretty straightforward. First of all, and I'm going to walk through this briefly. First of all, you make the request of the one customer or the lost customer. I'm going to talk about that in a second because it's very important how you position that request. And typically most win-loss programs begin with a straightforward survey that allows you to capture some quantitative data, but it also gives you some insight for the interview itself. So then you do the interview, you run a report on that interview, and then ultimately you're looking for patterns that you do over a series of interviews. Oftentimes I'll get asked, how many win-loss interviews should we be doing? I recommend between 20 and 40% of your quarterly wins and losses is a decent number to be looking for those patterns. Good random sampling, not just picking the corner cases, and that's a decent sort of percentage to pursue. Now, of course, if you introduce new pricing or you introduce new value proposition or something new, you might want to temporarily increase that, but you certainly don't have to do all of your one-loss customers. That's too expensive and too time consuming. Again, somewhere between 20 and 40%, probably erring towards the 40% is a better approach to do that. So let's talk about getting to yes. This is one of the big objections or concerns many people have is customers won't say yes. They simply won't take this. And so how you position the win-loss survey request is so important and is going to be key in whether or not you get that interview. And so I've got some sample text here. I think these slides are going to be distributed. But basically what we're framing here is that win-loss interview. Now, this is the one that my clients use, but you can repurpose it for yourself. And we're basically saying, look, we engaged you in the buying process. We weren't successful. What you think about us and where we did well and where we could do better is really important to us. And we'd love for you to engage in this process. Be assured, this is no sales agenda. We're not trying to upsell you, cross-sell you, salvage you. We just simply want 30 minutes of your valuable time to give us insight into where we did well and where we could do better. And so we're really appealing in some level to their ego and to their desire to, give their opinion. And lots of people like to give their opinion. We're framing it as being a very short amount of time for them to be able to do that. And we're trying to put lots of thanks and lots of sort of platitudes in there to try and, encourage them to do that. A question often comes up, should you offer incentives? It's a delicate path. With my company, we do offer incentives, and we offer a $200 incentive if you take that interview. Oftentimes, companies are limited to whether or not they can take that money themselves. We offer it as a gift card. And so typically we say, listen, we'll provide you a $200 gift card for Amazon, or we'll donate to charity. We here at Seal Point, we donate to St. Jude's. You could offer to donate to their charity of choice, for example. But you're acknowledging their time as valuable in this, and do that. Now, even with an incentive, even with a well placed together framing letter, if you get 50% of the people you approach actually agreeing to the interviews, you're doing well. The truth is, a lot of people are busy and they don't have the time to do this. Also, your success rates will go down if your sales motion is very transactional. So really, this only works best if you've had a meaningful multi-month sales engagement with them. If someone's gone to your website and didn't click to purchase, the chances of them doing a 30-minute interview speculatively is quite limited. So that's how we get to yes. We just check any inbound questions. Again, yeah, I agree with you, Orion. That's right. Another reason, in fact, I say that often, you'll never see on a loss report one of the reasons for a loss was sales engagement. You just won't see that, and that tells us something. I mean, we all have our cognitive biases, so that's just life. So next, doing the survey, we want to frame what the survey is. We want to make it clear this is less than 15 minutes. We're asking lots of open questions. We want to use a scale in those questions. We really want to make sure we limit the detail. A tempting thing is to create surveys that are 50 questions long. We don't want to do that. We want to keep the questions 5 or 6. We want under 10 minutes. And at the end of that, while it's fresh in their mind, we want to ask them, would you be open for that interview? The system we use then allows that target interviewee to then click and book themselves if that's what they want to do there and then. And there's tools out there like Calendly and Zoom, and it all just magically happens. But then you get their time booked in it. And when you pitch up for the interview, I'll talk in a second how you're going to do that. But again, if you're interested, that template survey is available on this website. If you want to download it, repurpose it, please do. It's a good starting point, I think, where we're asking what their role was in the buying process. We're asking to make that assessment of those whole offer factors I talked about before. And then when you get to the interview itself, it's really important, again, to set that context. Oftentimes when I get on the interview calls, I'll say, listen, again, I have no upsell agenda. I've no dog in this hunt. In fact, we'll probably never meet again. I'm just simply here to get your candid and honest feedback. And the more candid and honest you are, the better it is for us. So you lay out the structure. Our interviews come in 5 sections. We ask about engagement factors, offer factors, product factors, brand factors, and demand factors. We're often referencing back to any commentary or scores they gave in the survey. So that's a good starting point for us. And again, we're looking for pauses. We're looking for hesitations. We're looking for them thinking about structuring a sentence a certain way. Really what we're looking there when we're seeing for intonation and tempering, we're saying, are you holding back? So if I hear that, for example, in one of the interviews, I say, that seems to be important to you. Can you just say that again, perhaps in a different way? Because oftentimes you'll find them maybe trying to temper the words they want to use. And really what we want to do is get the brutal honesty. In fact, that's another reason why sometimes it doesn't work if sales guys do this, because oftentimes the sales guys have been, intimate with this customer for maybe 2 quarters. They know them well, they've had dinner and whatnot. And, the end customer lost may be reluctant to tell them the cold, hard truth about, I didn't like your pricing point. I didn't like your sales engagement. I didn't like your marketing. They might just temper it and just say, yeah, well, we decided to go another direction for political reasons. Oftentimes customers, won and lost customers, particularly lost customers, will give easy answers as opposed to difficult answers. So when you're doing the interview, you really want to listen for those pauses, those hesitations. And playing back is very good as well. This is what I think I heard you say, and playing back. Again, that interview should last 30 minutes at most. You're recording it on Zoom. You're going to run it through a transcription engine, one of the many ones that are out there afterwards, and that's going to form the basis for your report. And let's get on to that report. So this is actually an example of the reports that we produce. Again, if you want to see a template report, knock yourself out, Steel Point Research, you can click and download this report, reuse it for yourself, for your own programs. But I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about this. So we begin with the too long didn't read executive summary. This is for the executives to read. And here what we're doing is giving just a high-level summary of what was the assessment of that won or lost customer. In this case, it was a loss, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. What contributed towards the loss. So in this case here, this is a real live one here. I blacked out the names. Engagement, offer, and brand all contributed towards the loss. Actually, product was viewed positively and detracted away from the loss. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about this scale that we use. So then the next one, we're going to have what we do is within each of those factors. This is during the interview. We break down into sub areas. So for example, let's say in product, we begin by saying, what did you think of their vision and their roadmap? Did you get a vision and roadmap presentation? And how did you see that? What did you think of the features of the offering? What did you think about the implementation or the setup of the offering, usability, customization, and other? And here again, we're assessing whether their response was neutral, negative, or positive. And this is where we're looking for those patterns when we come through here. And then I'll get on to actually this one. It was quite an interesting one. The real reason why they lost was all around brand. It was nothing to do with product. So the next thing we do is we sort of summarize these quantitative results. And my clients really like this actually. So we've got a couple of things going on here. First of all, when we take in the inbound win-loss request, we ask our customer, and in this case, it would be you asking the sales guy, why you think you lost or won. And that's what the black dots are here. So this is what the salesperson responsible for this deal thought were the reasons for the loss. So they thought the sales engagement was really good. They thought that it was all about offer. That's why it was considered, you see here, -3 very much contributed towards the loss. They thought there was a neutral opinion on brand. Now the gold or yellow squares here is what the interviewee said. And so you can see here, we've got a spread between what the salesperson thought and what the interviewee said. And the second thing to note here is just this scale. We use a scale of -3 to +3. So we're asking, did one of these factors contribute towards the outcome, in this case, a loss, or did it detract away? And that's where we're trying to reveal something more. We're not just asking what led to the loss. We're saying, was there anything we did well that detracted away from that loss, even though we lost at the end? And this case, indeed, that was the case. Product was considered quite well. And then after that, and again, you can download a sample one from the website. Here's all the sort of, this is just capturing the key sound bites from the transcription and dropping it into each of these particular areas that goes through those details. And I'd said in this case here, the brand factors, particularly analyst coverage, was a major issue for the loss, where basically this lady commented that this was the big reason. I'd never heard of this company before. I reached out to the analyst. They'd never heard of them either. This was too high profile. I didn't see any reviews on Trust Radius or G2 or the other things. This was so high risk. I just couldn't go with these guys because there's no coverage, even though I really like their product. And then we usually ask, would you be open for additional meetings? And that's usually quite interesting for the product managers. Like, you seem to think the API was really interesting. Would you be open to spending more time with the product managers talking about that? And if they went well, that sort of does it. Loads more stuff on my website, loads of videos and templates and whatnot you can download. And I think I will just take some questions there, if there are any. If anyone wants to come off mute, I'm quite happy to take them live as well. I think we've got 5 minutes left.
Question?
Yeah.
Hey, well, thanks for taking the time to present. Pretty good points here. So from my experience, what I've noticed is that you're absolutely correct that sales like to control all the interactions, because if you don't give them the power, then it becomes an excuse. Well, somebody messed up my cycle. Also that what counts with that is because in B2B, you have like 10, 15 interactions. By the time the deal is won or lost, the customer has a fatigue of interactions, right?
Yeah.
So I imagine not imagine, but I kind of know from these interactions that customers don't really want to talk to anybody once it's done, especially in B2B. They'll be talking. They're not talking. So the question here, is there a way for your service to be kind of interweaved, embedded in a way throughout the process with a kind of predictive possible way to predict outcomes rather than waiting for the thing to be closed and then going to dig for more data?
I would say I have not tried that. Typically, you want to wait I agree with you that customers don't want to speak immediately after the loss. They definitely don't want to speak. So I'd recommend waiting 2 to 4 weeks after the loss to approach. And the key is it's not the sales guy approaching. In fact, typically my sponsor is the VP of product management, and it's the product manager reaching out and making that initial connection. If you bring the sales guys in, they're going to say, no, I'm done with you. I've been talking to you for 6 months. But if you say, listen, we had a really good swing at the ball. We tried our best. We didn't successful. Could you just spend 30 minutes with us and tell us where we could do better? If you frame it like that, I find, you get a decent success rate at 50%. I have done some work on churn, not nearly as much as win-loss, which is after an existing customer has churned, I asked what was the reason for the churn, and I said, what was the leading indicators? Like, could you have foreseen that churn coming 6 months ago, for example? A little bit of work on that, because churn is such an important one for SaaS and monthly recurring. If you can get those leading indicator signals that indicates a customer might be churning, I've done that, but I've never embedded this directly in a sales process. And I'm not sure it would work. I think it's too raw at that moment. This is sort of like an after the fact. I don't know what I want to say. I want to say autopsy because that sounds a bit grim, but you get the idea. Yeah. But good question. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I had a question. I think you said this was it's a good idea for people to do this even if they win the sale.
Yeah.
But do people come to you? Do your clients come to you very often after they win and ask for this service? Is that very common?
It's usually a job for me to convince them to do that. So
yeah, I would think so.
My service is on demand. There's no complex contracts. You can order 1, you can order 100, whatever you like. It's an on-demand service. Oftentimes it's, damn, I really lost that deal. I got to know why I lost that one deal. And that's usually the initial trigger for someone to do that. And then when they get the results, and by the way, these reports make the rounds to the CEO and all that sort of stuff, then people say, hey, we want to see more of these, because you should not do a knee-jerk reaction based on the one report. And then after time, I usually find after I convince them, look, you can learn stuff from wins as well. You should spend time on that. And the price point is kind of rounding for them. So it's 1:43 p.m. Yeah. I say the price point on the win-loss interview is minuscule in comparison to the multi-$100,000 deal they just lost or won. So it's usually not a big point. Anyone else? I think we've just got a couple of minutes left.
Why aren't more people doing these? and I include myself.
It's because it's time consuming. It requires perseverance and dedication to secure that win-loss, to secure that time and that survey. So the way my company works is you make the initial intro and then we take over the hassle job there. We're hassling that end person with phone calls and LinkedIn requests and emails to try and secure that. It's just too busy. Other people say they're already doing it, and then you get that sales pushback. Like, we're already doing win-loss, to which I answer, you're not doing win-loss. You're getting a single word you're dropping in the CRM system so you can administratively close this deal. And it's, in fact, it's almost better not to do that kind of win-loss, because you just see sales, you see product management teams knee-jerking at the end of the quarter, yet another, bitch session around the sales table about the price point. We don't know whether that's true or not, but we knee-jerk react and try and trim those prices. Or we've got to have the button on the homepage be red and not blue because someone claimed it. I don't know. We get into therapy here, but as product managers, we've all had those knee-jerk reactions. Anyone else? One more question?
Yes. Do you ever see the reverse where companies automatically just issue win-loss surveys for everyone, or is it just too time-consuming, as you mentioned?
I've not seen it in B2B. It does happen in B2C. I've seen that. You get those surveys. What do you think? But I've not seen it where it consistently happens in B2B. And maybe there are big companies that do it that I just don't know of. But listen, I think I'm up time. I welcome you. Check out my site. There's templates there. Again, I'm not trying to sell you or anything like that. I just want win-loss to be done because it was therapeutic for me to set up this company because I spent so many years as a product manager seeing very, very poor data come to us from win-loss. And I knew there was something better could be done. So whether I do it, you do it, I don't care. Just get it done because it's a super valuable intelligence resource that many of us just don't take advantage of.